עבד nicht. Working? I'm saying just for statutory, it was worth to talk. Whatever. Kapanim, I know there's a famous Maisa. The Rebbe was involved in making sure there's a kínus in Mont I think story my wife Zaydim or my Plotkin likes to stay over at the call to make sure there's a kínus, so it's definitely a big schus to do a kínus in Montreal. Kapanim, on Tuesday, everybody woke up to a very special surprise. It was snow, not for an hour, but a few hours of snow. And the we all know Pesach is Chag HaOviv, so to have snow on Pesach, it doesn't feel right. So apparently, it's Nishna de Posha that Pesach must be Bizman HaOviv, and we could find a shita that maybe says that Pesach doesn't need to be Bizman HaOviv, as we're going to see. In a very, very beautiful Sikha, the Rebbe talks about the union of Tkufas Nisan, Shir Sarambam Tkufas Nisan. So we're not going to talk now about all the details of Moed Alavona. We're going to learn Rambam Hashem in 2 weeks, and that's not so easy, but we're going to try to go through the basic Yesaitis quickly to understand what are we talking about, try to do it as simple and quick as possible. So we know we have our calendar, we have a year, and we have 365 days in a year. And this number came from, what is a year? A year is the amount of time it takes for the sun to go around the Kador Haaretz. And we have another count of months. We have 12 months in the year, and every month, 1 month, the amount of time it takes for a Levana to go around Kador Haaretz once. So we have a very special combination. On one hand, we have the year is by the sun. With Hasheni, we don't divide the year into equal parts to make month. We could have done, let's say, if a year is 365 days, we could have made 10 months, 12 months, 15 months, how many days month we want, just by dividing the amount of days we have in a year to equal parts and call it month. But Torah tells us in a few psukim, and this is the first mitzvah, that we have to follow the moon. And when the moon finishes one circle, this is considered a month. So one circle of the moon is a month, one circle of the sun is a year. And these months are fitting into that year. So every month is not an equal part of the year, rather it's a system on its own. And that creates a lot of problems, obviously, right? Because if it would be just a simple calculation of 365 days divided by however many days a month you want to have, it would be very simple. But now we have two separate systems, and we have to fit the amount of how many times can a moon circle Kador Haaretz in 365 days. So we all know it's 12, we have 12 months. This is 12 months of the year. Some months are 29, some months are 30, because the month itself is not exact. Sometimes it's 29. It's 29 point something, so we want to keep it even. So we have some 29, some 30, and that's the whole din of Kiddush HaChedesh. Now, we have another, so now we said that the year goes by the sun. How do we know that? Because the Pasuk says, Shomer is Chedesh Aviv. The Rambam brings down this Pasuk, Shomer is Chedesh Aviv. Torah says you have to guard the month of spring. Now, month is a term which connected to a Levana, right? That's what we said. Chodesh, Chidush, a Levana is Mischadesh. A sun is not Mischadesh. Sun is the same sun. The Torah calling Chodesh Ha'aviv seems to be a contradiction. So that tells me that Chodesh needs to be connected to Aviv. Why is it a contradiction? Because Aviv is concept of season. Season comes from the sun. Depends where the sun is exactly and what angle the sun is standing compared to Kador Haaretz. This is what creates a different weather and seasons in the year. So when we Torah says Chodesh Ha'aviv, that tells me that the month have to be aligned with the seasons. Oh, and here we come to the discussion of the Sikha of this Rambam. The Rambam says that we have a din to make sure the Chodesh is in the Aviv. Which Chodesh? So the Pasuk says, Shomer is Chodesh Aviv, ve'osisa Pesach LaHashem Elokecha. So from the context of the Pasuk, we understand that which Chodesh we're referring to. We're referring to the Chodesh of where the Yom Tov of Pesach is. Shomer is Chodesh Aviv, ve'osisa Pesach, right? So we understand that the month of Nisan has to be in the season of Aviv, which called in Halacha, in Chachmas Dachul, called Tkufas Tkufas Nisan, Tkufas Aviv, Tkufas Aviv. So we need to make sure that this align. Why it doesn't align? So let's go back to that point again. As we said, we have two systems. We have the solar system, which is 365 days, le'erech, and we have the lunar system, which is every 30 days we have a new cycle. So to make it simple, so we have approximately 11 days, the 12th month of the 12th time the moon circulating around the Kadmor Haaretz, we are short 11 days le'erech from the sun, from the solar year. And because of that, what's going to happen? So if we're keeping on counting the month without making any changes, what's going to happen is that this year, Nisan was during this time of the year. Next is going to be 11 days earlier, and then another year, 11 days earlier, and earlier and earlier and earlier. It's going to be the Pesach could be instead of spring, would be in the winter, and then in the summer, and then in the spring, and then it's going to be just going in circles, right? So that's why Torah tells us, Shomer is Chodesh Aviv. We have to make sure that the Chodesh of Nisan is aligned with Aviv. How do we do that? We do Hebrew year every 2-3 years. We have another month. What that does is all the extras of 11 days are compounded together and it becomes another month. But then Pesach Nisan is like swinging back and forth. Yeah, it goes back and then it goes forth and back and forth. So here comes the Machlekes. The Machlekes is how much exactly is the length of the solar year. And that's very, very important because it's important to know because of that we're going to know how much shorter is the lunar system from the Shnas HaChamo. And that's important to know when Pesach is and all the other things. So the Machlekes. Machlekes Shmuel and Ravada. So Shmuel says it's 365 days and a quarter. This detail is going to be important for later, that's why I'm saying it now. And Ravada's shita is it's 365 days, 5 hours, and 997 chalakim, and a few more regoim, which basically means it's around 100 chalakim shorter than the year of Shnas HaChamo Liba de Shmuel. So it seems not a lot. 100 chalakim, if we take for context, we have 1,080 chalakim in 1 hour. So 100 chalakim is not a lot, but over a long amount of period of time, it makes a big difference. And the difference is that Rambam says like this, that every 19 years, the sun and the moon meet in the same place where they started, from the beginning. Now, if we make, before that, in different words, we have two models here. We have a model of Shmuel, a model of Ravada. They're both trying to understand what's happening in the sky. Yeah? How long the sun takes the sun to go around Kadmor Haaretz. We have two models. One model says it takes 365 and a quarter. One model says it takes a little less than that. So, the problem is that if we make the cheshbon, so every 19 years, according to Shita Shmuel, we're going to be left with about an hour and a half gap. So every 19 years, you have an hour and a half gap accumulating over the years. So the kasha that we have in the Rambam, his name is the Pirush, that's how he's printed. But I looked it up, his name is Ovadia ben David, And some people say he's Einikel of the Rambam, some people say he's not, like some Ur-Einikel. He lived like around the Rishonim time, a little after Rishonim, around the Tkufa, after the Rambam, a few hundred years of the Rambam. So he asked a Pashta Kasha, if, according to Shita Shmuel, after a certain amount of years, we are constantly creating a bigger gap between the sun and the moon, so how can the Rambam say we soymech on Shita? The Rambam says we soymech on Shita Shmuel because according to Shita Shmuel, there's only an hour and a half show and almost half a show of lack between every 19 years between the sun and the moon. After a certain amount of years, what's going to happen is that Pesach going to be before Tkufas Nisan, before the time for spring. And Torah says Shomer is Chodesh Aviv. Is a big kasha. And he says, when Mashiach comes, he's going to tell us what to do. Because the Chayra doesn't work. Yeah, so again, we have two models, how to calculate how long it takes the sun to circulate around Kadmor Haaretz, Shmuel and Ravada. According to Shmuel, we have a bigger gap every 19 years than according to Ravada. The Rambam actually says no gap at all, but obviously there is, just much smaller. And surprisingly, the Rambam says, so machnu al shitas Shmuel. He says, we soymech on that shita, this is the length of the solar year, and this is how we do our tkufas. after a certain amount of time, Pesach will, of course, going to move to be in the winter, slowly, every 19 years by a show and a half. So Mashiach is going to come. So this is a sefer that it brings called the Itim Labina, I think, that says that Mashiach is going to come. That during 6 Alfi Shnin, we're not going to have completely month of Nisan off. Month of Nisan at least is going to be still within Kufas Nisan, within the spring, but Pesach will not. And the question is on Pesach. As we're going to see, we're going to talk about it just in a second. So the question is, so there's a Pashta Kasha that the Pirush is asking this. So Rabbi Ben David is asking, why are we saying on that shita? So maybe we was the Bible we could have said. The Taka, we're not soymech on the Chita and the Rambam. If you look at the Rambam, so the first din of Shemos Chedeshav is brought in Perek Aleph, and then he goes in Perek Vav, he mentions the Shita of Shmuel, and then in Perek Tes, he goes through that Shita Ba'arichos, and Perek Yud he goes through Shita's Ravado, and Perek Yud he says that the Ravada Shita is more Meduyuk, is more Emes Yoiser. So maybe we could have said that his Shita, the Rambam Shita Taka is not that we soymech on Shmuel le'inyan zeh. We soymech on Shmuel maybe for other things, maybe somehow to make something up like this. And Taka the Shita we soymech on Ravada, because why? What's the matter of Ravada? Because according to Ravada, if there's no gap between if there's no growing gap every 19 years, you could have Pesach always in Tkufas Nisan, always in Tkufas Aviv, as it should be. So the shayla is, why do we go with the model of Shmuel if the Rambam himself said the model of Ravada is more meduyuk? So that's obviously we cannot say that because the Rambam says clearly so machma shita Shmuel, and for the union of Tkufas, and also Shmuel himself. Like what does it even mean? The whole reason why we creating these models and trying to figure out what do we care what the sun is doing, what the moon is doing, what's the chiluk is this? Because we're trying to meet up the chiv of Torah of Shomer Chedesh Aviv. That's the only reason why we're creating these models. So comes Shmuel and he's creating a model, doesn't work. So what's that from the Sabbath? So that is Mechadash very, very beautiful Yesod. And there is Mechichet from different places. Now I'm not going to go into those Heichachas, but just in the Kuda, that there's two dinim. When Torah says Shomer Chedesh Aviv, Torah said two things. This is the month of the Pesach, which is in the month of Nisan, has to be approximately every year at the same time. Meaning it doesn't have to be exact. Pesach has to be in a Nisan, and they both have to be in a time at the same time every year. Lerech doesn't have to be exact. So even if Pesach could be before the season of spring comes, it's still okay. As long as Nisan is still in the month, in the time of spring, because then Pesach is in a month that comes in spring. That's one din. A zweite din is the Taka Pesach has to be chal in Tkufas Aviv. So that's a yesod. The Rebbe sticks to that yesod, even though obviously it's right away comes the question. So okay, so what did we gain? We gained that Shmuel's model makes sense for one of the dinim. There's two dinim. One din says that the Pesach has to be in Tkufas Nisan. The other din says that Nisan, the month of Nisan, has to be in Tkufas spring, which is called Tkufas Nisan. And so his model works for that tkufa. Okay, but it doesn't work for the main tkufa. For the main din. For Pesach to be in Chedesh Aviv. And maybe according to the Shita Shmuel, Take, to have snow in the middle of Pesach, that Take makes sense because as Pesach doesn't have to be Tkufas Aviv. As long as Nisan, even a little bit of Nisan is Tkufas Aviv, that's already good. So it could snow for a whole Pesach. Anyhow, so, so, here Rebbe starts another word. It says something like this. So we cannot say for sure that Shmuel doesn't fit according to this model. But it must work. The whole raya. The raya is we have a din called Birkas Hachama. This sikha the Rebbe spoke in Tovshin Yud Gimel was the first time Birkas Hachama for the Rebbe in America or in the Seas. And the Rebbe said that the Rebbe spoke around the time of Birkas Hachama. The Rebbe spoke about the Dem Sikha. And the Rebbe is saying like this: the whole concept of Birkas Hachama could exist only according to the model of Shmuel. Why? So we're going to say it very briefly, just to understand. according to Shmuel, we said the length of the solar year is exact. It's 365 and a quarter. According to Avada, the length of the solar year is 365, 5 hours, 997 chalokim, and maybe I think 47 regoyim or something. So, okay. So now, Birkas Hachama, the Gemara says that the sun every 28 years, according to the Sabai, goes to the same place he was, Betchilas Habriya. And of them, we say a bracha. Baruch atah Hashem, that what does it mean? The Gemara says like this: if you see the sun in the place where it was in the beginning of B'riyas Ha'olam, you're supposed to say a bracha. Oh, now, according to the model of Ravado, for the sun to be in the same place where it's going to be, where it was in the beginning, it's going to take thousands of years. Well, yeah, we don't need to understand the math to understand to get the point of it. If your math, if your numbers are equal, 365 and a quarter, so this was in the beginning here, so continues the cycle. So every time it's going to be moving 6 p.m., 12 p.m., 6 p.m., not 12, 10 p.m., 4, it's going to be moving in 6, yeah? Eventually, it's going to land in the same time, in the same place, on the night between Tuesday and Wednesday, when David created the world, and the Cham is going to be in the place where it was. Eventually. So we know it's after 28 years. Kushlis Ravando, the numbers are not equal, are very, very random. 365, 5 hours, 997, it's going to take tenth of thousands of years to enter the same place. So the whole concept of Birkas Hachama that we do is only if it's according to Shita Shmuel. It doesn't work according to Shita Ravando. So that it must be that we take Shita Shmuel halacha. It's not something which is a shita that you could somehow play around with. That's the only way to do a bracha. If you should say Ravado, the bracha is bracha levatala. Because what are you saying a bracha on? The bracha is if you see the sun in the place where he was, you see the bracha. The sun is not there. The sun is not in the same place he was. The sun is a few degrees this, 2 degrees the other way. We can't make bracha, and it brings an error over there. There's different shittas in the Achrayim, maybe Take shouldn't be saying a bracha, making different cheshbonos to pull him how, and the Chatam Sefer says Torah and Gadol, and he writes that he remembers how his Rebbe also out there did Birkas Hachama, that's why he's going to do it, but he's very not comfortable with this because it doesn't make any sense, and the Chama is not there because halacha is k'kravada. So what we see is a kapanim that Shita Shmuel must be the halacha. So here we're going to be mechadesh, a very stark word that Rebbe says many times in so many different ways all over the Rebbe's Torah. And the yesod is that everything we have lamato mishtal shem milamayla. It's found in the mamish in the earliest sichos of the Rebbe, and Rebbe keeps on saying it over and over again. Everything comes from milamayla. Ubemele, says the Rebbe that the things that we need to do, what we're doing lamato, we're trying to tune in to what is going on lamaila. That's what we're trying to do. So, and that brings an example. We know that in Kiddush HaChodesh, if Bezin Kiddush HaChodesh b'shoigeg betos, or even b'mezid, the mekudesh, the levana is mekudeshes. L'chayra, there's no levana. We didn't see it. There was no levana that night. We say no. That's the halacha. The levana is mekudesh. So there why? Because the emes is aliba. Once Bezin b'kadesh levana nizgal as aliba the emes. Tonight was supposed lemailo. Tonight is a new levana. Here we don't see it. Because the Welt is grub, we're not zoiche, for whatever reason, we don't see it. But once Bezdin makes a Kiddush HaChodesh, it's Mekudesh. And this is the reality. Sometimes we zoiche, sometimes we're not. So the Rebbe is saying, also we could say by Shmuel. That Be'emes, Take, Shita Shmuel in Birkas Hachama, Be'emes, Take, the Chama is not there. We don't see the Chama. The Chama, because the model of Ravada is the true model. And this model, according to the model of Ravada, the Chama is not there. How do we say a bracha? Because the Chama is in that place. But by the way, Rebbe is asking, obviously, that doesn't make any sense. How can we say such a thing? We know that Rebbe Chassidus Meir Chalat, how term is chashev with the Metzius von Welt. How can we say a bracha on something that doesn't exist? Right? It's a big chiddush to say that we say a bracha because the Chama is Lemailo, Chama is not here. How can you say bracha? Meile by Levana, because Taine, but Levana could say this Chodesh is Mekudesh, even though the Levana was not there, because I could say it, because the whole concept of Levana connected to only Dine HaTorah. There's no nafkemine if it's Aleph Tzibei Tzigimel Tzidaled, unless to when to make Pesach, or to when fast Tainis Becheres, or when to do Bikas Chametz. That's the only nafkamina that you have from when the levana is, when the moilad is. So legabe these inyanim, we can sagen that even though it's not there, but since the whole nafkamina is aliba the Torah, so in Torah's perspective it exists because it matters only to Torah perspectives. But by saying it by birkas hachamo, it doesn't work. Because what's the gather the Gemara says? If you see chamo outside and you see the chamo in the same place where he was in the beginning, you should say a bracha, but you don't see it there. So what helps me is that the Ma'ileh sees it. So the Rebbe is going to say, see I'm a little late. The Rebbe is going to say such a word. We don't have so much time. I'm going to finish up quickly. The Rebbe says such a word that the question we need to ask us first to understand how that works, and we still going back to understand the chiluk between why do we say Shita Shmuel if Pesach doesn't work according to Shita in the right time of spring of Tkufas Nisan. So it was saying this a very very gishmak and nekuda. It brings the Taisus. Taisus in Masechet Rosh Hashanah speaks about when was the first Tkufa. When was the first Tkufa of Nisan? When was the first time it was spring of the world? So for this, we have to go to a very famous machlekes, machlekes Abloz and Rabbi Yeshua. When was the world created? Benisan tzibur Tishrei, right? Abloz says B'Tishrei, Rabbi Yeshua says Benisan. And we find in halacha we follow both shittas. We say that Shoshana la'odam is B'Tishrei, Shoshana le'tkufes, or for other things, Malachim, it's Benisan. So we see that we follow both shittas. He's asking, how can you have both shittas? How can you follow both shittas? Says Tosfos because one is b'maisa, one is b'machshava. That word they state. As this is a word b'machshava and a word b'maisa. Says ben Nisan nivoy lo b'machshava, betisha nivoy lo b'maisa. So according to this different word, what does it say? What does it tell me? That so l'poel mamish. What happened? There was a time when it was toil before B'rei Solam, and then Hashem created the world. During the time of toil, Hashem had a tkufa of Nisan, because this is when all of the machshav and B'Seilam. So Kumta is that the first time there was a tkufa of Nisan was before what was created, tkufa of Nisan. Says Rebbe Bazei, we understand very well. Now we could understand why we could go B'Shita Shmuel to make bracha on the chamo, even though the point of the chamo is not there. Why? Because the whole yesod of the cheshbainis, when is tkufa Nisan is in a time. It starts from a place when there was no levana b'poel. There was no chama b'poel. There was no moon. There was no sun. There was no sun b'poel. In the year before Hashem created the world, Tkufas Nisan, which is the chamo, didn't exist. It existed in machshava. So if the whole concept of chamo and Tkufas chamo is existing only in machshava and not the ma'aseh, so what's the problem to say a bracha if the sun is not there? The whole yesod of the sun is only in machshava. So it made a taka. Be'emes, we could say, technically we should have said the bracha, also if you don't see the chama. The din is that the Gemara Zok, the relation to halacha, that you have to see the chama, you have to see the bracha, because the din k'may shulamaylo is mislabesh in k'may shulamato. Then the chama shulamaylo is mislabesh k'may shulamato. That's why we need to see a kaponim to make the bracha. But it doesn't start milamato. And therefore it's like this. In the beginning we thought that we wanted to say that the chama and is as David the levana, that since it's a concept of Torah, we could say that even though we don't care because Peter is does as Bilamayla sees as we said to say this you could say by Levana that as long as Bilamayla says this is what we follow. By Chama we can't say that because the Chama is the Mitzias Gashmis. Now the Rebbe is telling us fakert. Chama is the Mitzias Gashmis. The Birkas Chama at Kufas Nisan is not the Mitzias Gashmis. The whole yesod is the Machshava. Or maybe even if you don't see the Chama, B'Poyel, it doesn't. It's not a problem. You could still make a bracha. Ali b'Shmuel. Shmuel. And the Rebbe, okay, fine. So what Kumta is? So Kumta is first of all, Kumta is that what the Rebbe's Mechadish is that Shittas Shmuel and Ravade are not the Machlekes as it seemed to be Bepashtus. Right? Bepashtus and Machlekes, it's two models. According to this, Kumta is that it's not two models that are Choylek what going on in the sky. It's two, they speak about two things. Sure. Shmuel talks about the way it is Lamailo. Ravada speaks the way, Shmuel talks the way it is the Milo, and the Ravada speaks the way it is the Mato. And what Shmuel tells us, his model is Emes, because this side is the Milo. This is the Emes. Sometimes it aligns with what is Lamata, sometimes not. According to Rav Adam, that we say his cheshbon is more meduyuk, but what are we saying? We say his cheshbon Lamata, his physical cheshbon, Rav Adam is more meduyuk. So it's the machlekes in different words they talk about different things. Rav Adam talks about how it is Lamato, Shmuel talks about how it is the Milo. And Kumtai, the Shmuel, he's the one in a way more correct than Rav Adam, right? Because everything mishtash milamaylo, everything developed is milamaylo. So the correct one is Shmuel. That lamaylo, that this is what's going on, and Rav Adam is the one which is totally begidra mata. What's going on here lamata. But according to this, what we need to understand is, let's go back to the first question. First question was how according to Shmuel that doesn't work Pesach to be in the right time of the year. So we said, how does it work according to Shmuel? Because Pesach is going to be not in Kufas Nisan. But let's ask this question differently. After all this entire people of the Rebbe makes, that again, the Yesod number one is everything Mishtash Milamayla. Yesod number two, Shmuel is more correct in that sense than Ravada, because he speaks how it is the Maila, and sometimes it aligns with the Matam, sometimes it's not. And that's why even though if the Chama doesn't align with the Matam, still say make a Birkas HaChama. So how come that the Pesach works Dafkol to Ravada? Should be for Karet. Pesach, the Pesach falls in the right time, should be like, so if not for Karet, maybe we should say it differently. So Kumtei, that the fact that Pesach comes in the right time, it works only the figure Gidrei Amato, and not the figure Gidrei Amaylo. Yeah, again, Shmuel is Gidrei Amaylo, what is going on Ali B'Demes, by Deibishter, and Ravada what's going on Lamato. So Pesach fits, now the Torah said it's to be Chodesh Aviv, right? Pesach has to be in time of spring. So which spring? Which spring has to be? Has to be the Lamaylo spring or the Lamato spring. Kumtei said it fits, that the Pesach fits our spring only with Ravada, not Aliba the Shmuel. So Hastis, the Pesach, which is a Yom Tov from Torah, goes, if everything is Tashem from Torah, from Eibishter, so Kaponim, the Yom Tov of Torah should be in this Masim to Lamaila. How come the Yom Tov of Torah is not Masim to Lamaila? Yeah? So we made Shmuel so good that now the question how come Pesach doesn't fit to be in spring is not a problem, because what do you mean? We go B'sa Pesach K'moshu Lamaila. And the question becomes the other way. How come that only Ravada, which is his whole word is Gidrei Amato, according to him it fits to be in the spring? So it means it doesn't fit according to the way it is the Milo? The Ravada's model doesn't fit according to the way things are the Milo. So Rebbe is saying a very beautiful word. That's the last word. Rebbe is saying that when he thinks of Torah needs to be, Torah is aligned with the Milo and the Mata. I mean, different words, the model, the way it works, the Milo, is not tied down to the Shita of Shmuel. Hashem does whatever he wants. Generally, Shita Shmuel. Sometimes Hashem puts us wherever he wants. So Mele Pesach, since Pesach is from Torah, and Torah is to be Poilim Welt. So then Zichar the Pesach is masim the way it is the Milo. Pesach Lamato fits the way it is the Milo, even though it doesn't work, meaning it's not consistent. Here, it goes out of order. Even though according to the model of Lamailo, which is model Shmuel, this is not when Pesach is, but Hashem makes it to work. And when we see this cook of the Rebbe has that everything is mishtal from Torah. The kufah, the sun, the moon, and everything else as well. When we see the world, it looks a little different. Good Moed.
Shkoyach Mendel, Mr. Shem, the Hemshech from Kийнus will take place on Monday, Islu Chag. And mit dem Zecher sein schon das Sim von Golas, thank you for that mamish. I want to use this opportunity, if anybody wants to go to the Halucha and not to go, to speak, anybody please come up to me, maybe I'll have a place for you. Shkoyach.